The American Management Association said in 2019, that's the most recent data they have, even before COVID, $100 billion was lost in America every year due to worker productivity loss from office politics. And a lot of that's connected to DEI. Are you using the right pronouns? Are you standing in the right place? Are you saying the right things? Are you politically correct? Those things actually destroy productivity, and it's really hurting the American workplace.
Hi everyone, this is Veronica Kirilenko of the New American Magazine. Businesses worldwide are facing mounting pressures to improve and document their environmental, social, and governance performance, or ESG. Essentially, the ESG scoring is a way to rank companies by their compliance with left-wing social and environmental agendas. Companies that aren't willing to follow these policies are threatened with losing investors. At the same time, the employees of those companies that are on board with the ESG may find themselves in a highly uncomfortable situation of being subjected to woke policies in the workplace. Is there anything that can be done about it? Today, it's my privilege to speak with an exceptional gentleman who recognizes the American workplace as the most recent conquest of the culture war, and who knows how to fight it. With me today, Andrew Crapuchettes, the founder and CEO of RedBalloon. Andrew, welcome, and it's my honor to speak with you today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and hello, everybody.
Yeah. So, Andrew, the ideologies and subscribers of the ESG advertise it as a responsible, all-around good strategy for the companies to, quote, help them act on and measure what is mutually good for profits, people, and the planet. But it is not how you see it, is it?
No, it's not. ESG is really, it's actually 18-year-old. It turned 18-year-old. It was invented by the United Nations as a way to use this kind of woke ideology to score businesses and say, hey, how are you doing on pushing on really a left agenda? And so environmental social governance, that's what the ESG stands for. And obviously environmental, how are you doing to save the planet and the whole green agenda? Which is generally bad for profits. And then the social aspect of it, that's where usually things like DEI or CRT trainings that go into these corporations, that's where those things generally fall. And to give you a scale of what this looks like in the American workplace today, companies in America last year spent $8 billion on DEI training. And that's just the direct cost of consultants and training materials, $8 billion. And that doesn't even include the demoralization of the American workforce that training produced. Because you remember, if you're told you're a racist, there's nothing you can do about it, you're guilty, no matter what, that is going to basically destroy productivity. And we're seeing that. The American Management Association said in 2019, that's the most recent data they have, even before COVID, $100 billion was lost in America every year due to worker productivity loss from office politics. And a lot of that's connected to DEI. Are you using the right pronouns? Are you standing in the right place? Are you saying the right things? Are you politically correct? Those things actually destroy productivity, and it's really hurting the American workplace. Over the last 2 years, we have seen a consistent decline in worker productivity. That's not how many people are working, but how much they're getting done. And so this ESG policies are actually driving really bad results for companies and for the U.S. economy. So no, I am not a fan of ESG, and the data is showing that they're not a good thing for America. And we're seeing that in some of these states, when Florida is pulling out of BlackRock, pulling billions of dollars out of BlackRock, because they realize it is bad for the economy, it is bad for the American workforce, and it is bad for the companies to try and live up to a standard that's bad for business.
Yeah, at the same time, the data is very concerning because, for example, according to ESG.org, 2/3 of investors take ESG factors into account when investing in a company. And according to a survey by Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, 90% of bankruptcies in the Standard & Poor's 500 between 2005 and 2015, so it's a bit dated, but still relevant, I think, were of companies with poor ESG scores 5 years prior to the bankruptcy. So what's your comments on that? It looks like major investors are really pushing really hard the companies to actually implement the ESG and this diversity training and stuff.
Yeah, well, obviously, when you have a worldview, when you're pushing a worldview on other people, you're going to try and use data to make your case, even if that data is out of context. So the last business that I ran was the nation's leading labor market data company, and we had billions of data points of data. And so I know better than anyone, you can use data to tell almost any story that you want to, and I think that's exactly what is happening here. And in fact, the company that I was running, that I'm no longer running because it was bought by KKR's ESG fund, and they decided that I was too conservative and Christian. And so I was fired for perception, not performance, at that company as the CEO. And that's the kind of thing that maybe isn't going to show up in the data, but the company's simply not performing as well as it used to. Because when you are spending more time on ideology than on business, everyone knows, common sense knows that is not going to produce the right results. And so I basically would push back against that data. If you read books like Woke Inc. by Vivek Ramaswamy, there's an enormous amount, there's a growing body of work that ESG is actually producing very, very poor results. Even if you don't think the ideology is bad, which I do think it's bad, you should be able to look at that data and ignore I'll say the false data that might be showing that it's a good thing for America.
Yeah, of course not. And I think the latest example would be Victoria's Secret's CEO resigning, well, just days ago amid the plummeting price of the company's shares. The company, as you remember, embraced the woke and inclusive marketing and advertising strategies that did not play well with the customers. Yet it does not seem like the brand is willing to reconsider its approach. How do you explain that?
Yeah. Well, again, you need to understand, anytime you want to understand what's going on in the world around you, you need to understand what is the history of the ideology that's driving that behavior, right? So if you look at the kind of the beginning of this woke ideology and this ESG in the American workplace, you can actually trace it back to 2008. So 2008, if you remember, that's when the Occupy Wall Street movement was happening, right? All these people were saying big banks, big companies are bad because they're making a lot of money. And so these big banks and big companies decided that, we don't want to be the bad guy because it's not good for our shareholders. It's not good for our customers. It's not good for us as executives to be the bad guy in this situation. So they kind of looked around and said, hey, who has the biggest microphone in our society? Who's the person who can tell everyone in a convincing way that we are the good guys in the society, right? And so that was the liberal media. And again, this is quite a few years ago. I think the liberal media has lost some of their sway, but they still have quite a bit. So they looked at the liberal media and said, what would you like us to say? And the answer was, okay, we want you to say systemic racism is a huge problem in America. Global warming or climate change, because it looks like global warming is not in vogue as much anymore, but climate change is a big deal in America. And in the world. And so they basically said, okay, great, we'll sign up to say all of those things. And if you look at Nike, they would decry the sins of slavery, which I think slavery is horrific, but they would decry the sins of slavery in America while effectively using slave labor in Asia to build those tennis shoes that you have on your feet right now. So that's the kind of thing, that's how it started in the corporate world, where they were actually just using it as a tool as a PR tool to try and get the good graces of the liberal media. But unfortunately, what happens is when they do that, they start to believe it themselves and they start to hire HR departments out of these woke universities. And lo and behold, they're making bad decisions for business because they think it's a good PR move. But we see with companies like Netflix and Disney, it actually is bad for your bottom line to be pushing against that worldview. Do you know that every diaper company in America today actually supports Planned Parenthood, which seems like a horrible business decision, right? Whether you think abortion is wrong, which I do, whether you think it's wrong or not, if you're a diaper company, you want more babies because that's more customers, right? And so that is the most common sense example of a worldview that is bad for business. And so that's why I think, but they've adopted that wholeheartedly so that they can't even see what they're doing anymore. Because if you're a diaper company, you should not support abortion. You should support, birthing centers and people having baby, because then you have more customers. So
and
it's
not
a
to
funny
mention
world.
that this is just morally wrong.
And it is
For
absolutely
many
morally wrong.
Americans.
Correct. Yes.
And Andrew, you mentioned the demoralizing effect of the diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, and how employees of the both companies are not on board with this agenda, and how they feel uncomfortable being there and working for these companies. And please elaborate on this a bit more. And is it why you started the RedBalloon?
It is.
Just to help people.
Yeah, no. And the stories that I hear, and I've got hundreds of stories, but I'll give you a couple of them. One lady called me. She was at Deloitte, and she had just gone through, they were doing DEI training, although they kind of split it up so that they could really focus on each one of those letters independently. And I will say, as a little bit of a side note, diversity, equity, and inclusion, those words are not evil in and of themselves, but they have been weaponized against the American worker and against the Americans in general. So she was going through her inclusion. So she was doing DEI and she was on I, and it was a 2-hour seminar. And she said most of the seminar was just telling her that she was a racist, whether it was didn't matter whether what your skin color was, didn't matter what your background was, who your family was, you're a racist. And it's just a scale of 1 to 10 how racist you are. And she's like, so, after this 2-hour training, everybody's just kind of got their head down and like, well, like I am guilty until not even just proven innocent. I'm just guilty, period. And then the trainer gets up after demoralizing these people for a full 2 hours and says, I wish all those unvaccinated people would go to an island and die together. And she's like, and the room is just like dead silent. Like an American just said that to another American. And she's like, this is my moment. I don't even like this job that much. So she raises her hand and she says, I'm never going to get that vaccine. And then the room was just like, you could cut the tension with a knife. She said, but this is the cool part that happened. About 10 seconds later, after the trainer is just like in this panic moment, because she thought everyone just agreed with her, right? In this panic moment, 2 other people raise their hand and say, yeah, I'm not going to get that shot either. And what that tells you is that when people are brave, it will give courage to people who are around you. And so RedBalloon.work did this big campaign in the month of June, coming out conservative in the month of June. We thought it'd be a good month to, quote, come out conservative, live your values out loud. You don't have to be shrill like the liberals. But we got dozens of stories from people saying, I came out conservative in my workplace, and I found that greater than 80% of the people in my company agreed with me. Because the current conservatives, we are the largest ideological group in America, but we've been the least likely to say anything. And so when you just kind of keep your head down and live your values inside and at home only, you are actually hurting the people around you, and you're not giving them courage. And so this demoralization of America, the only way to push back against that is for people to actually have a little bit of courage. Another story was there was a lady at Microsoft, and she actually was a vice president at Microsoft, and she had an American flag for the background of her Zoom or her Teams video calls, American flag. And HR department called her and said, guess what? That is triggering to some of our employees because that's a sign of white supremacy in America. So you're not allowed to have an American flag on the background of your Teams call. And she's like, that just takes the wind out of you. Like, who am I anyway? But here's the worst thing. She said, literally the next day, a coworker had a picture of a black man being lynched as their background for Teams. And it said, a good man died at your hands today. That is straight out of the CRT playbook. And she's like, okay, I'm out. I need a new job. So she went and found a new job on RedBalloon.work and ended with a happy story. But the fact that our American corporations today are allowing that kind of behavior, not just allowing it, but celebrating that kind of behavior in the workplace, it doesn't allow you to focus on work and the value you can bring to customers, the value you can bring to the company. It's all just virtue signaling and trying to make everybody think you're the wokest person out there.
Yes, Andrew, please tell us a bit more about the first of its kind employee bill of rights that you came up with. And I understand that one of the rights that is written in this bill is the right to speak up in the workplace, especially in areas of conscience. Please explain how the First Amendment rights work in a setting of a private company.
Yeah, absolutely. So part of the reason we came out with this Bill of Rights is I would have people call me and say, I'm really just stuck in this woke workplace. I need to support my family. I need to pay my mortgage. I need to feed my kids. And so what am I going to do? And I said, so you're not stuck. You need to be an American, and Americans actually know how to push back and fight and do the things that they need to do. So I thought, a lot of people don't know where they're allowed to push back, how they're allowed to push back. And so the only way we can do that is to give them that information, because knowledge is power. And if you have the knowledge, then you're able to push back. And so Laura, the labor lawyer, who is on the RedBalloon team, went to Harvard Law School, was a labor lawyer in the People's Republic of California for 20 years, fighting the good fight. So she's been in the battle. So she put together the Employee Bill of Rights and Responsibilities. And the reason we said rights and responsibilities, we know that the way that America was established and the way that the world works, the way that God built the world, is that if you have rights, you also have responsibilities that come along with that. So we put out this free resource as Employee Bill of Rights and Responsibilities. And before I tell you about it anymore, let me tell you a story of someone who actually read that and then used those rights and responsibilities. He was a vice president of sales at a fairly large biotech company, and he had a whole company training where he was talking about their new products, and he quoted Proverbs from the Bible in that. He didn't even use the reference verse. He just quoted a proverb. And the next day, he got the proverbial call from the HR department saying, you're not allowed to use the scriptures. That's religious discrimination to use the Bible in your presentation. And he's like, well, first of all, how did you know it was the Bible? Because I didn't use the reference verse. So I'm really glad that you know your Bible. He said, but here's the second thing. He says, that is an ancient proverb. And if I had quoted an ancient Chinese proverb or an Indian proverb, you wouldn't have had a problem. Because it's the Bible, you have a problem. So I want to ask you a question. Why are you putting your career on the line over this little silly thing? And all of a sudden, the HR department kind of took back because they're used to always being on the offensive. But because he'd read the Bill of Rights, because he knew what his rights were and what he was allowed to do in the workplace, he was able to push back. And suddenly, the HR department was on their heels, which is fantastic. And he still kept his job, and they left him alone. And he was kind of able to do whatever he wanted. So I think a lot of conservatives don't realize liberals would like to throw the first punch, but they don't want an extended fight. And so the Employee Bill of Rights and Responsibilities is 5 rights and 5 responsibilities that you need to know that you have in the workplace. And one of them that's really interesting is the right to organize labor. And I know that sounds like unions a lot, but the reality is that there are a lot of protected rights. You can get together with other employees in your workplace, get together after work and say, we are going to sign a petition that we don't want a vaccine. We don't want masks. We don't want DEI training. You can work together to push back against woke ideology, and you are perfectly within your legal American given rights to do that. And when you do, you're going to be a blessing to everybody else in your workplace.
Yes, absolutely. So, Andrew, and who are your clients in general? Is it just individual people who are looking for the new opportunities and a workplace that is free from oppression and, this terrible ideologies? Or is it the companies as well, businesses who are trying to find new employees?
Great question. So, we started this about a year ago, RedBalloon.work, as a place for, think of it as employment matchmaking for the conservative world, for the alternative economy. And it's been really fun. We have over 2,200 businesses who have signed up, and every single one of them has signed a pledge that they will protect the constitutional rights of every employee up to and including medical privacy. And so you have thousands of businesses who are looking to hire people who will protect your rights and are not a bunch of woke people. And then on the other side, we've had over 1.5 million job searches by people who are just looking for freedom in the workplace. And it's been amazing. We're helping people like Louder with Crowder or Gavin DeBecker and Associates, companies that are big, respected companies who are looking for the type of workers who are going to be additive to their culture and not subtractive from their culture. One employer said that every employee that they hire off RedBalloon.work is cleansing to their culture because they're just another hardworking conservative who wants to focus on doing a great job, and they understand the meritocracy that America was founded on and not on the political correct trying to virtue signal to all the left woke media mob. So that is what we do. Employers can post their jobs, and then they can get access to the largest database of pro-freedom job seekers in the country. And it has been just a really fun adventure because I've run a lot of businesses over the years. And this is the only business that I've ever run where I get unsolicited thank you notes from perfect strangers who say, you know what, you have changed the trajectory of my family, because a vocation is such an important part of who a person is. And if you can help them get in a job where they can live their values out loud, where they can be free, they're going to be free at home, they're going to be free in their communities, and they might just be free in the polls every 2 years.
Yeah, sounds wonderful. I would like to thank you so much for your time today and for this incredible business that you run. Andrew, please tell us, what's the best way to connect with and learn more about the RedBalloon and you personally?
Yeah. So redballoon.work is where you want to go, not com.work, because we think work is a good thing and it is actually satisfying and good for your soul. So redballoon.work. You can follow us on all the social media platforms, both the woke ones and the non-woke ones, at RedBalloon Work. And you can follow me at Crapuchettes. It's the normal spelling of Crapuchettes, which there is no normal spelling of Crapuchettes. But redballoon.work. We would love you to have you join this movement. You can download the Employee Bill of Rights for free. There's a ton of blog articles on what's happening in the workplace today. And we would love your support and your encouragement, because we're all in this fight together.
Thank you, sir.
As a lumberjack, I've been cutting wood for decades. My job is pretty straightforward. I see the wood, I chop the wood. My axe goes through every time. You remember when everyone bought all the toilet paper? And they wanted me to wear these things? And someone invested a lot of money into this stuff. They say I'm part of a global plan. I don't think so. It's too hot, it's too cold. You know what? The weather changes. We even hear crazy ideas on how kids should learn.
Here's the news, Dad.
Is it, son? Is it?
What about this one, Dad?
Nope. It's hard to tell what's real and what's fake these days. There's just too much baloney out there. At the New American, they cut through the baloney and give me the truth.
Visit thenewamerican.com and subscribe to get 50% off the cover price. And if you want an even better deal, use the promo code 10OFFSUB. Again, that's 10OFFSUB for more than 50% off.